I recently lived through my own worst nightmare. The HOA president took a chainsaw through the fence my wife and I built while I was out running errands. Her excuse? She claimed the community needed a quicker route to the lake. Funny thing is, the only thing taken down that day was her ego once I bought the dirt under her feet. Let me start from the beginning. I knew something was wrong before I even hit the turn onto Sycamore Lane. Over the steady hum of my sedan, I heard it, an enraged, splinter-cracking scream of steel on timber. My pulse spiked. The postcard row of maples and candy-colored mailboxes slid into view just as a fountain of cedar shrapnel burst across my lawn. There he was, Cynthia's hired gorilla in an orange vest, chainsaw buried in the brand-new fence Emily, and I had sweat 3 weekends to build. Chips flew like shrapnel, and my gut free fell. Someone was carving up the one place that was supposed to be untouchable. I slammed the car into park, not even bothering to pull all the way into the driveway. My feet hit the pavement before the engine was even off. My heart was a drum solo in my chest. Rage, hot and pure, shot up my spine. Every instinct screamed at me to run over there and use that goon's face to stop the saw. But I'm not that guy. Not anymore. I'm the guy who thinks first, the guy who plans, the guy who wins. So, I took a deep breath, clenched my fists until my knuckles were white, and walked. Not ran, walked. Every step was deliberate. Every step was a promise. Standing on the sidewalk, surveying the damage, was Cynthia. Of course, it was Cynthia. She was the president of our homeowners association, which in her mind made her the queen of everything the sun touched. She held a fancy coffee in one hand and a rolled-up piece of paper in the other, which she tapped against her palm like a tiny scepter. She had a smile on her face that didn't reach her cold, calculating eyes. It was the smile of a cat who had just pushed a glass off a table for no reason at all. Behind her, my beautiful fence, the one Emily had picked the wood for. The one I'd gotten splinters building was now a jagged wreck. A huge section was just gone, lying in splinters on the grass. "Afternoon, David," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Making some improvements, I see." The chainsaw roared one last time, and then sputtered to a stop. The sudden silence was louder than the noise. My wife, Emily, came running out the front door. Her face was pale, and her eyes were wide with disbelief. She saw the fence, then she saw me, and her hand flew to her mouth. I could see the tears welling up. Seeing her hurt was like a lit match dropped into a puddle of gasoline in my soul. I ignored Cynthia for a second and looked at Emily. I gave her a tiny nod, a nod that said, "I've got this. Go back inside. Don't let her see you cry." Emily is the best person I know. She's loyal and kind, but she's sensitive. She feels things deeply. And a bully like Cynthia feeds on seeing other people's pain. Emily hesitated, then nodded back and retreated into the house. Good. Now I could focus. I turned my full attention to the queen of mean. "Cynthia," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "You have 3 seconds to explain why your hired muscle is using my fence for firewood." She just laughed, a short, ugly bark. She unrolled the paper in her hand. It was a poorly made flyer with the HOA logo slapped on top. It looked like something she'd made on her computer in 5 minutes. "It's all right here," she chirped, holding it out. I didn't take it. "The beautification committee has decided that we need a more direct access path to the community lake. Your property line is just too inconvenient. This is a shortcut for the good of the community." I stared at her. A shortcut? She had destroyed thousands of dollars of my property, terrorized my wife, and ruined our weekend project for a shortcut because she was too lazy to walk another 50 feet to the public path. The sheer entitlement was breathtaking. It was like watching a natural disaster in human form. "You're telling me," I said, keeping my voice level, "that you think you can just chainsaw a hole in my property for your own convenience?" "Our bylaws are very clear," she said, her smile tightening. "The HOA has broad authority to ensure access and maintain community standards. This is an official access corridor now." I looked at the goon who was wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of a greasy glove. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He knew this was wrong. He was just a tool. Cynthia was the one holding the handle. My mind was racing. The hot-headed part of me wanted to scream. It wanted to list every one of her deplorable, menacing acts since she took over the HOA. It wanted to tell her exactly what kind of evil, petty tyrant she was. But the devious part of me, the part that had kept me safe in much more dangerous places than this manicured suburb, took over. It whispered a simple, cold truth. "Don't get mad. Get even." So I smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was all teeth. "A shortcut, you say?" An official access corridor. I looked at the splintered wood. I looked at her smug face. I looked at the sky. You know, Cynthia, I think you're right. It is a shortcut, and I'm sure you'll find it's much shorter than you think. Her smile faltered for a second. She wasn't used to people smiling back when she did things like this. She was used to tears and angry, sputtering phone calls. She wasn't used to me. I turned without another word and walked back to my house. I could feel her eyes on my back, a mixture of triumph and confusion. She thought she'd won. She thought she'd shown the new guy who was boss. She had no idea what she had just started. As I closed the front door behind me, I heard Emily's worried voice. David, what are you going to do? I walked past her, straight to my small home office, and sat down at my computer. I pulled the blinds shut. Honey, I said as the login screen glowed to life. I'm going to do what I do best. I'm going to read the fine print. Cynthia wanted a war over a piece of land. She just didn't realize she was fighting a man who knew that the real battles aren't won with chainsaws. They're won with paperwork. And my war was just beginning. This whole mess didn't start with a chainsaw. It started with a dream, a simple one. Emily and I wanted a house with a yard, a place where you could hear crickets at night instead of sirens. We were tired of the city. We'd saved for years, and when we found this place in the Lakeview Hills subdivision, it felt perfect. The brochure showed happy families, sparkling water, and lush green lawns. It promised peace and community. What it didn't mention was the troll guarding the bridge to that peaceful kingdom, Cynthia, the eternal HOA president. We learned about her in stages. The first week, we got a notice. A crisp, white envelope slid into our mailbox. The violation, our welcome mat. It was, according to Rule 114, subsection B, a non-approved color. It was brown. A brown welcome mat. Apparently, only beige or gray were acceptable. I laughed. Emily was worried. Maybe we should just get a new one, she said, her brow furrowed. I told her it was ridiculous, a power trip. I threw the notice away. The next day, there was another one, this time with a $25 fine. We bought a gray mat. It was a small thing, but it was a taste of her methods. Absolute control over the smallest details of our lives. That's when I met my neighbor, Walter. Walter was in his late 60s with wild gray hair that looked like he'd been permanently struck by lightning. He wore Hawaiian shirts year-round and spent most of his day tending to an army of plastic garden gnomes. He saw me swapping out the welcome mats and shuffled over, holding a watering can. Gotcha, did she? He said, his eyes twinkling. The mat mandate. Classic Cynthia. He introduced himself and proceeded to give me the entire history of Cynthia's reign of terror. He was the neighborhood's unofficial historian and chief gossip, a walking encyclopedia of petty grievances. Walter told me about the porch pirate war, where Cynthia tried to ban all package deliveries left on porches, claiming they were unsightly clutter. That ended when half the neighborhood almost missed their Amazon orders for a week. He told me about the Great Mailbox Standoff, where she demanded everyone repaint their mailboxes the exact same shade of black, providing a single approved contractor who charged 3 times the normal rate. I later learned that contractor was her cousin. Every story was the same. Cynthia would invent a problem, cite a vague bylaw, and then offer a solution that either made her feel powerful or made her or her family a little richer. Walter was funny, a much-needed dose of comic relief in this suburban drama. He called her Queen Cynthia, first of her name, breaker of barbecues, and mother of fines. He had names for her enforcers, too. The chainsaw guy was Bert the Brute. The woman on the board who just nodded at everything Cynthia said was Nodding Nancy. Walter had seen it all. He'd lived here for 30 years. She wasn't always this bad, Walter explained, trimming a tiny beard on a gnome dressed as a wizard. Her husband left her about 5 years back, took a lot of money with him. After that, the HOA wasn't just a hobby anymore. It became her kingdom, her source of power, her whole identity. That made a twisted kind of sense. She was a woman who had lost control of her own life, so she was trying to control everyone else's. That didn't make me feel sorry for her. It just made her more pathetic and more dangerous. Emily tried to stay positive. Maybe if we just follow the rules, she'll leave us alone, she'd say. My loyal, sweet wife. She wanted peace. She didn't understand that with a bully like Cynthia, compliance isn't a path to peace. It's an invitation for more abuse. You give them an inch, they take a mile, and then they fine you for the missing inch. My personality, the one forged in years of navigating messy, high-stakes situations, is protective. It's fiery. When someone I care about is threatened, something inside me just clicks into place. I become very, very focused. I saw the way Emily would jump every time an official-looking envelope appeared in our mail. I saw how she stopped wanting to sit on the front porch, worried that Cynthia would drive by and find something to criticize. This woman was stealing our peace, the very thing we moved here to find. How far will a man go to defend his own? I was starting to find out the answer. It was farther than Cynthia could possibly imagine. The fence was the last straw. It wasn't just a fence. It was a symbol of our home, our little slice of the world that was supposed to be ours. When she put a chainsaw through it, she wasn't just cutting wood. She was declaring war on my family. She was telling me that nothing was ours, that we lived here only by her permission. And I just couldn't accept that. Walter, in his own strange way, gave me the final push. As I was stewing in my office that afternoon, he called. "Heard about the fence," he said. "That's a new low, even for her. You know, a guy a few years back tried to fight her on a big fine. He said her power wasn't as solid as she pretended. Mentioned something about the HOA's original charter, how some of the land out here is weird. Weird land. That was it. That was the thread. Cynthia thought she was playing checkers, moving her pieces around our lives. She had no idea I was about to flip the whole board over. She had brought the fight to my front door. Now, I was going to take it to hers, using a battlefield she didn't even know existed. I thanked Walter for the tip. He just chuckled and said, "Give her hell, kid." As I hung up the phone, a cold, clear plan began to form in my mind. The first step wasn't lawyers or angry phone calls. It was research. Deep, quiet, and relentless. Cynthia had shown me her weapon of choice was a chainsaw. I was about to show her mine was a keyboard, and I was much, much better with mine. The war room was my 10 by 12-foot home office. The hum of the computer was my battle drum. Cynthia thought her power came from a binder of HOA rules. What a fool. Real power, the kind that lasts, comes from information. And I was very, very good at finding it. My past life, the one I didn't talk about much, had taught me how to dig, how to sift through mountains of boring data to find the one gleaming needle of truth. I wasn't looking for dirt on Cynthia. Not yet. I was looking for dirt. Literally. The patch of land she'd carved through. I started with the county assessor's website. It's a public resource, but most people find it as exciting as watching paint dry. To me, it's a treasure map. I pulled up the plat map for our subdivision, a spiderweb of lines and numbers that defined every single property. I found my lot. I found Cynthia's lot. I found the public path to the lake. And then I found it. A thin, awkward little sliver of land. It was tucked right between the back of my property and the community path. It was the exact strip of land where the remains of my fence now lay in ruin. According to the map, this strip didn't belong to me. But it didn't belong to the HOA either. It didn't seem to belong to anyone. It was designated as Parcel 7B. It was an island. My heart started beating a little faster. This was interesting. I cross-referenced Parcel 7B with the tax records, another public database, another gold mine of information. I typed in the number and hit enter. The result popped up on the screen, and I had to stop myself from laughing out loud. The parcel was listed under the name of the original developer, a company that had gone bankrupt 15 years ago. And more importantly, the property taxes on Parcel 7B hadn't been paid in 3 years. For anyone who doesn't know, when property taxes go unpaid for a certain amount of time, the county gets to take the land and sell it at auction to recoup the money. It's how they keep the system moving. Most of the time, it's forgotten slivers of land, junk lots nobody wants, pieces of a puzzle that got lost under the couch. They're called orphan parcels. And Cynthia, in her infinite arrogance, had just declared war on me from a piece of land she had no claim to whatsoever. She had trespassed on land owned by a defunct company and destroyed my property in the process. It was a rookie mistake. A beautiful, glorious, rookie mistake. Emily came into the office with 2 cups of tea. She saw the intense look on my face. "What is it, David? You look like you're plotting to take over the world." I took a sip of the tea. It was warm and comforting, a stark contrast to the cold, devious plan forming in my head. "Not the world, honey," I said, turning the monitor so she could see. "Just a tiny little piece of it." I explained what I had found. The orphan parcel, the unpaid taxes. Her eyes widened. "So, she had no right to do that?" "None at all." "Less than none," I confirmed. "She's as much a trespasser as if she'd walked into our living room and started sawing the legs off the couch." Emily's relief was immediate. "Oh, thank goodness. So, we can call the police. We can file a complaint." I held up a hand. Easy, Tiger. We could. And it would turn into a messy he said, she said. She'd flash her fake HOA pamphlet, and it would get tied up in bureaucracy for months. There's a better way. A more permanent way. That's when I pulled up the final website, the county tax auction page. And there it was, scheduled for 2 weeks from now. Parcel 7B. Opening bid. $117, the grand total of its 3 years of unpaid taxes. Emily looked at the screen, then at me. The worry crept back into her face. She was loyal, my Emily, and she trusted me. But she was also sensitive to conflict. She hated it. You're going to buy it, she whispered. David, are you sure? That's poking the bear. Honey, I said, taking her hand. The bear already came into our yard and smashed our picnic basket. We're not poking it. We're building a cage for it. I explained the plan. I would buy the land. Quietly. I would become the legal owner. Then, and only then, would I make my move. It wasn't about provocation. It was about defense. It was about building a legal wall so high and so strong that she could never, ever touch us again. She squeezed my hand. Just be careful. She's a nasty person. Nasty people rely on others being scared or confused, I said. I'm not scared. And after tonight, I'm not confused either. I know exactly what to do. The auction was online, a simple, anonymous bidding process. For the next 2 weeks, I lived with a secret. I walked past Cynthia's house every day on my way to get the mail. She'd sometimes be out front, giving me that smug, triumphant smirk. She thought she'd won. She thought I was defeated. She had no idea that for the price of a decent dinner for 2, I was about to buy the very ground she stood on when she ordered my fence destroyed. The countdown to the auction began. Every day was one step closer to putting the first iron bar of my cage in place. But I couldn't shake a nagging feeling. What if someone else wanted the land? What if she found out? The only thing I could do was wait and hope my secret stayed safe. The 2 weeks leading up to the auction were the longest of my life. Every time I saw Cynthia's car drive by, my stomach twisted into a knot. I was living a double life. By day, I was David, the quiet neighbor who had seemingly given up after his fence was destroyed. By night, I was a strategist, checking the auction site, making sure no other bids had appeared, and planning my next move. Emily was a nervous wreck. She would look out the window at the gap in our fence and just sigh. I wish this was over, she'd say. Soon, I'd promise her. It will be over soon. The day of the auction, I worked from home. I had the bidding page open in a small window in the corner of my screen. The auction was set to close at 5 p.m. My bid was in, $117. All day I watched it. No other bidders. My logical brain told me this was normal. Who would want a useless, 10-foot wide strip of land behind a row of houses? But the paranoid part of my brain, the part that had served me so well in the past, was screaming. What if she knew? What if one of her cronies at the county office tipped her off? At 4:55 p.m., my heart was pounding. 5 minutes to go. I kept refreshing the page. Still just my bid. For 58, my palms were sweating. This was it. This was the foundation of my entire plan. Without this piece of land, everything else would crumble. For 59, I held my breath. The clock on the website ticked over to 5 p.m. The page refreshed one last time. A banner appeared at the top. Auction closed. Winning bidder, M734B. M734B. That was my anonymous bidder ID. I had it. It was mine. A wave of relief so powerful washed over me. I felt lightheaded. I had just bought the battlefield. I didn't celebrate. I didn't shout. I just quietly paid the fee with my credit card and downloaded the temporary deed. The official one would come in the mail. I closed my laptop, walked into the living room, and gave Emily a hug. We own the shortcut, I said into her hair. She hugged me back tight. Now what? She asked. Now, I said, a grin finally breaking across my face. We build a wall. I made the call that night. A 24-hour fencing company that specialized in commercial security. I explained the situation. I needed a 6-foot-tall, wrought iron fence. I needed it installed on a precise property line, and I needed it done before the sun came up. It was a rush job, and it would cost a premium. It was worth every penny. I emailed them the deed and the plat map. The crew agreed to start at 2 a.m. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in a dark living room, watching out the window. Right on time, a large truck pulled up, its lights off. A team of 4 men got out, and using nothing but flashlights and hushed voices, they went to work. They were professionals. They moved with quiet efficiency, sinking the posts into the earth, welding the iron panels into place. It was a thing of beauty. As the first hint of dawn painted the sky pink and orange, they were packing up their tools. Where there had once been a splintered wooden fence and a muddy path, there now stood a formidable black iron wall. It was stark, imposing, and undeniably permanent. It ran the entire length of my new property, completely and totally blocking Cynthia's precious shortcut. I paid the foreman, and they were gone as silently as they had arrived. I made a pot of coffee and sat on my porch, waiting. It was the best cup of coffee I had ever tasted. Around 7:30 a.m., Cynthia's front door opened. She emerged in her yoga pants and a t-shirt that said, "Live, Laugh, Love," which was deeply ironic. She had her coffee mug in hand, ready for her morning stroll across my yard to the lake. She took about 3 steps, looked up, and froze. Her mouth fell open. The coffee mug slipped from her fingers and shattered on her driveway. She just stood there, staring at the black iron fence as if a UFO had landed on my lawn. Her face went from shock to confusion to a deep, blotchy red of pure rage. It was magnificent. She marched down her driveway and right up to the fence, grabbing the cold iron bars. "What is this?" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "What have you done?" I took a slow sip of my coffee. "Morning, Cynthia," I said calmly. "Like the new fence? It's on my property, of course. Bought it at a county auction. Turns out the taxes were overdue." The gears were turning in her head. I could almost see the smoke coming out of her ears. She understood what I had done. I hadn't just replaced my fence. I had outmaneuvered her. I had used the rules, her favorite weapon, against her. "You can't do this," she sputtered. "The HOA. This is an access corridor." "Not anymore," I said, getting up and walking to the edge of my porch. "It's private property now. My private property. And you are not welcome on it. I'd be careful if I were you. I'm thinking of putting up no trespassing signs. And I hear the fines are pretty steep." Her face was a mask of fury. She was a cornered animal, and her only response was to lash out. The next few weeks were a blur of petty warfare. Forged utility permits appeared on my door, claiming they needed to dig under my new fence. I'd call the utility company, confirm they were fake, and add the document to a growing file I labeled Cynthia. Bogus lawsuits were filed, claiming a historic right-of-way. My lawyer got them thrown out of court in minutes. Each stunt she pulled just gave me more evidence, more proof of her harassment. Emily was getting worn down by the constant stress. Every new letter, every new threat from Cynthia sent a ripple of anxiety through our home. "When will it end, David?" she asked one night, her voice small. "It ends when she learns she can't win," I told her, holding her close. "We can't back down now. We just have to weather the storm." I knew I was right, but her pain fueled my resolve. This wasn't just about a fence anymore. It was about getting this woman out of our lives for good. Cynthia thought she was escalating. She thought she was turning up the heat. She didn't realize she was just handing me the rope I would use to hang her. And her next move was going to be her biggest mistake yet, a truly dangerous escalation that would change the game completely. The phone call came while I was in a boring quarterly meeting at work. It was Emily. Her voice was trembling. "David, you have to come home. Right now." I could hear shouting in the background. "What's wrong? What happened?" I asked, already grabbing my keys and heading for the door. "It's Cynthia," she said, her voice choked with panic. "She's here with men and a backhoe. They're saying there's a gas leak and they have to dig up the new fence. They have a city work order. David, they're going to tear it all down." I have never driven so fast in my life. Every red light was a personal insult. My mind was a whirlwind of rage and fear. A gas leak that was low, even for her. Using the specter of a public danger, something that could actually scare people, was a new level of evil. It was brilliant in its depravity. Who would argue with an emergency gas line repair? I screeched into my driveway and saw the scene. It was worse than I imagined. A huge yellow backhoe was parked on the street, its engine rumbling. 2 men in hard hats and orange vests were unloading equipment. And there was Cynthia, directing them with a smug, victorious look on her face. She was pointing right at the middle of my iron fence. Emily was on the porch, looking helpless. I vaulted out of the car. "What in the hell is going on here?" I bellowed, my voice cutting through the air. The worker stopped and looked at me. Cynthia turned, her smile widening when she saw the look on my face. She thought she had me. "Public safety issue, David," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Major gas line rupture detected right under your fence. The city has to dig immediately. Such a shame about your wall, but you can't stand in the way of an emergency." She held up a work order. It looked official. City letterhead, signatures, the whole 9 yards. But something was off. The crew leader, A burly guy with a weathered face and tired eyes looked more confused than concerned. He wasn't moving with the urgency of a real emergency. I walked straight up to him, ignoring Cynthia completely. "Let me see that order," I said. My voice was calm, but it had an edge of steel. He looked at Cynthia, who gave a slight nod. He handed it to me. I scanned it. It looked good, too good. It was too clean, too perfect. "Who's your supervisor?" I asked the crew leader. "Name and number." "Now." He hesitated. Cynthia stepped forward. "You can't interfere with city workers, David. That's a felony. So is forgery." I shot back without looking at her. I stared the crew leader down. "The number." "I'm not going to ask again." The guy saw something in my eyes. He knew I wasn't bluffing. He sighed and rattled off a name and number. I pulled out my phone and dialed, putting it on speaker. As it rang, I held up the temporary deed to my new property. "While we're waiting, I want you to know you are currently on private property. This fence is on private property, and I have not been notified of any utility easement on this land." A voice answered the phone. "City Works, this is Tom." "Tom," I said, my voice loud and clear. "My name is David. I'm at 124 Lakeview Drive. I have a crew here led by a guy named Mike for an emergency gas line repair, work order 7-3B. Can you confirm this is a legitimate order?" I could hear typing on the other end. Cynthia's smug look was starting to crack. Mike, the crew leader, was looking very, very uncomfortable. 124 Lakeview. Tom said, "No, we have no active work orders on that whole street. Order 7-3B was for a sewer inspection on the other side of town. It was completed yesterday. There's no gas leak. Who issued that order to your crew?" The silence was deafening. Mike's face went pale. He snatched the work order from my hand and looked at it again, then looked at Cynthia. The rage building in his eyes was a sight to behold. He had been played. His crew had been used as pawns in her sick little game. He had pulled his men off a real job for this. "You," he started, pointing a thick finger at Cynthia. "You forged this? You dragged my crew out here on a fake call." Cynthia started to stammer. There must be a mistake. I called the emergency line myself." "Get the hell off my job site," Mike roared at her. "And you can bet your shiny car your name is going straight into a report for filing a false emergency claim and forging a city document. That's a crime, lady." He turned to his men. "Pack it up. We're out of here." Cynthia was sputtering, her face a mess of disbelief and fury. She had overplayed her hand so badly it was spectacular. As the crew was loading their gear, Mike, the crew leader, walked over to me. He was still fuming. "I am so sorry about this, sir," he said, shaking his head. "This woman, we've had weird calls from her before. Rush jobs, strange requests, always quoting some HOA nonsense." Then he leaned in closer. And this was it. This was the moment the whole war shifted. This was the twist I never saw coming. My heart skipped a beat. "A file? An internal file? Wait here," he said. He walked to his truck, opened the passenger door, and rummaged around in a worn-out satchel. He came back with a plain manila folder. It wasn't thick, but it felt heavy. "I wasn't supposed to have this," he said, pressing it into my hands. "My buddy gave me a copy, just in case. You didn't get this from me." He gave me a sharp nod, then turned and climbed into his truck. As the backhoe and the truck drove away, Cynthia was left standing alone in the street, humiliated and defeated. I stood there in my driveway, holding the folder. The battle for the fence was over. I had won. But this file, this felt different. This wasn't about a property line anymore. I had a feeling I was now holding the key to dismantling her entire kingdom. What secrets were hiding in this folder? And what was I going to do with them? I waited until Emily was asleep. I didn't want to worry her with what I was about to do. This felt different, darker. The fence, the land purchase that was defense, that was protecting my home. But this folder, this felt like an attack. I went into my office and closed the door. I sat there for a long time, just staring at the plain manila folder on my desk. It was a Pandora's box, and I was about to lift the lid. My hands were steady as I opened it. It was worse than I thought. So much worse. It wasn't just a collection of forged work orders. It was a detailed, if unofficial, record of years of corruption. There were copies of invoices from landscaping companies, roofing contractors, and paving services, all for work done on the community property. And next to them were handwritten notes from Mike's friend in the permits office. Notes like, "Build HOA for 20 trees, only 10 delivered," or "Paving invoice for $50,000. Actual cost estimated at $20,000. Contractor is Cynthia's brother-in-law." It was a pattern of kickbacks and embezzlement laid out in black and white. She wasn't just a bully. She was a thief. She was stealing from our neighbors, from all the people paying their dues, thinking the money was going to maintain the community. Instead, it was going into her pocket. There was more. Records of her using HOA funds to pay for legal challenges against residents she just didn't like. Evidence she'd had the HOA pay for repairs on her own home, disguising them as work on the community clubhouse. The file painted a picture of a woman who saw the HOA not as a responsibility, but as her own personal piggy bank and private army. My first thought was simple: take it to the police. This was evidence of multiple crimes. They could get a warrant, seize the official HOA records, and her whole rotten empire would come crashing down. I picked up the phone. My thumb hovered over the digits for the non-emergency police line. Emily's voice echoed in my head. Just be careful. This was the clean path, the right path. Hand it over to the authorities and let them handle it. But something held me back. My world-weary side, the part of me that had seen systems fail, kicked in. What if the police bungled the investigation? What if she had a friend on the force? What if her lawyer managed to get the evidence thrown out on a technicality because of how I got it? She could walk away clean, and I'd be left with a target on my back bigger than ever before. She wouldn't just be angry. She'd be untouchable. This was my moral crossroads. I had the weapon, a nuclear bomb of a weapon. I could press the button and hope for the best. Or I could do something else. The devious part of my brain, the part that Cynthia herself had woken up, started whispering. A police investigation would be about justice. But justice can be slow. It can be unsatisfying. I wasn't just looking for justice anymore. I was looking for a guarantee. I needed to not just defeat her, but to dismantle her power structure so completely that she could never, ever hurt anyone in this neighborhood again. To do that, I couldn't just rely on the system. I had to become the system. My neighbor Walter called as if on cue. His timing was either psychic, or he just had nothing better to do. So, I saw the circus this morning, he crowed into the phone. The backhoe, the shouting. Heard you sent her packing. It's the talk of the neighborhood. What's your next move? Are you going to build a moat? Fill it with alligators? I know a guy who knows a guy. His ridiculous suggestions were a welcome break from my dark thoughts. I'm thinking, Walter, I said. Just thinking. Well, don't think too hard, he said. With a snake like Cynthia, you gotta check everywhere. Under the rocks, in the trees, even in her own garage. You never know where they're hiding. And then he hung up. But his words stuck with me. Even in her own garage. It was a throwaway line, a classic Walterism. But it sparked an idea. A wild, audacious, beautiful idea. My fight with Cynthia had started over a piece of land, a boundary line. I had been so focused on the land she trespassed on, I had never even thought to look at her own. What if her kingdom wasn't as legally sound as she thought? What if her own castle was built on sand? I put the phone down. The manila folder was still open on my desk. I looked at the evidence of her financial crimes. This was my ace in the hole, my insurance policy. I wasn't going to the police with it. Not yet. That would be my final move, not my first. First, I was going back to the battlefield I understood best, the county assessor's website. I was going to use her own tactics against her. She lived and died by property lines and bylaws. Fine. So would I? I had already defended my border. Now, I was going to launch an invasion. A quiet, legal, and utterly devastating invasion of her own turf. I pushed the manila folder to the side. I didn't need it right now. I had a new target, a new mission. My moral crossroads was behind me. I had chosen my path. It wasn't the simple path of the good citizen. It was the winding, clever path of the strategist. And it led directly to Cynthia's front door, or, more accurately, to her garage. The plan was so audacious, so devious that it made me grin. It was one thing to defend my own property. It was another thing entirely to go on the offensive. This was the part of the game where you move from defense to attack, and it required a whole new level of focus and stealth. My new obsession became Lot 114, Cynthia's address. I spent hours staring at the plat map, cross-referencing it with satellite images, historical surveys, anything I could find in the public record. My office was littered with printouts covered in notes and highlighter ink. Emily thought I was going crazy. You're spending more time with those maps than with me, she joked one evening, though there was a hint of real concern in her voice. This is the last piece of the puzzle, honey, I promised her. Once this is in place, it's checkmate. Walter's accidental advice, check her own garage, had turned into a full-blown investigation. Her garage was a monstrosity, a brand new 3-car garage she'd had built the year before. She was immensely proud of it. She'd even submitted a photo of it to the HOA newsletter under the headline, Community Improvement Spotlight. The irony was thick enough to choke on. From the satellite view, something looked off. It looked big, bigger than the space allotted for it on the original plat map. It seemed to crowd the property line of the empty, wooded lot behind her house. This was where the real digging began. I had to go down to the county records office in person. The online stuff was great, but the old, dusty files held the real secrets. I took a day off work, telling Emily I had a dental appointment. I spent 8 hours in a windowless basement room that smelled of old paper and dust, poring over decades-old survey maps. And then, on a hand-drawn map from 1972, I found it. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was another one. Another beautiful, forgotten, perfect little orphan parcel. It was a tiny sliver of land, no more than 15 feet wide, that ran along the back of 3 properties, including Cynthia's. It had been created as a drainage easement when the subdivision was first planned, but the final construction had used a different drainage system, so this little strip of land was abandoned. It was never absorbed into the neighboring lots. It just sat there, ownerless on the books, belonging to the same defunct development company as my first parcel. It was parcel 9C. And according to my measurements, comparing the old map to the new survey I'd found in her building permit file, a solid third of Cynthia's brand new 3-car garage her pride and joy was built directly on top of it. I felt a surge of adrenaline, a thrill of victory so intense it was almost dizzying. She had no idea. In her rush to build the biggest and best garage, she had cut a corner. She had assumed that useless patch of trees behind her house was no man's land. She never bothered to do a proper survey. She, the queen of rules and regulations, had broken the biggest one of all. She had built part of her castle on land that did not belong to her. Now came the tense part, acquiring it. I checked the tax records. Just like parcel 7B, the taxes on 9C were unpaid. And by some miracle of bureaucratic timing, it was scheduled to go up for auction in 3 days. This was my window. It was a tiny window, and I had to move through it without being seen. If she got wind of this, she could just pay the back taxes herself and claim the land. The county would probably let her. I had to get it before she even knew it was a threat. The next 3 days were a masterclass in quiet anxiety. I didn't dare use my home computer to check the auction. I used the public library's computers on my lunch break. I created a new anonymous bidding account. The opening bid for parcel 9C was even less than the first one, $82. It was the most valuable $82 I would ever spend. The day of the auction was even more stressful than the first time. This was for all the marbles. This was the move that would put her in an impossible position. The auction closed at 5 p.m. I was sitting in my car in a grocery store parking lot, refreshing the browser on my phone over and over. My bid was the only one. At 5:01 p.m., the confirmation came through. I was the official owner of parcel 9C. I owned the land her garage was sitting on. I just sat there in my car for a full 10 minutes, letting it sink in. I had her. I truly had her. She thought she was fighting me with lawsuits and fake work orders. She had no idea I was coming at her from an angle she couldn't even see. I had used her own obsession with land and property to set the perfect trap. That night, I didn't go to my office. I hired a lawyer, a sharp, aggressive guy who specialized in real estate disputes. I laid out the entire story for him. I showed him the deeds to both my new parcels. I showed him the photos of my destroyed fence. I showed him the survey map of her garage. He looked through everything, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Mr. Thompson," he said, leaning back in his expensive leather chair. "This is the most beautiful case of homeowner comeuppance I have ever seen. She has no legal standing at all on any of this. So what's the move?" I asked. His smile turned predatory. "We don't ask. We don't negotiate. We dictate." He picked up a legal pad and a pen. "We will draft a notice. It will be delivered to her by a process server tomorrow morning. The notice will be simple. She is illegally occupying your property. She has 2 options. Begin paying a monthly land lease to you at a rate I would describe as extremely high, or demolish the offending portion of her structure within 30 days. We will, of course, include the bill for my services and the cost of the new fence you had to install." It was brutal. It was ruthless. It was perfect. The trap was set. All I had to do now was wait for her to step in it. And I knew Cynthia. She wasn't going to take this lying down. But for the first time, it didn't matter what she did. It didn't matter how she fought back. I owned the ground beneath her feet, and there was nothing she could do about it. The question was no longer what I would do, But what would she do when she realized she was completely and utterly cornered? The process server delivered the notice at 8 a.m. the next morning. I watched from my window as a nervous-looking man in a cheap suit handed Cynthia an envelope. She snatched it from him, clearly assuming it was another legal filing from one of her own useless lawsuits. She tore it open right there on her doorstep. I couldn't see her face clearly, but I could see her body language. She went rigid. The papers in her hand started to shake. Then she looked up, her eyes scanning the neighborhood until they locked on my house. Even from across the street, I could feel the sheer hatred coming off her in waves. It was like heat rising from pavement. For 2 days, there was silence, a tense, heavy quiet. It was the calm before the storm. I knew she was scrambling, calling her lawyers, trying to find a way out. Walter called me, his voice giddy with excitement. "The whole neighborhood is buzzing," he said. "Someone saw a process server at Queen Cynthia's castle." "What did you do, you magnificent madman?" I kept it vague. "Just returning some mail she sent me," I said. The first crack in her fortress appeared on the 3rd day. A sleek, expensive car I recognized as belonging to her lawyer pulled into her driveway. The lawyer, a man with silver hair and a smug face, was in the house for less than 20 minutes. When he came out, he was walking fast. He got in his car and sped away without so much as a backward glance. He had seen my case. He had seen the deeds and the survey. And like any good lawyer, he knew a losing battle when he saw one. He was dropping her as a client. That's when the real twist came. The one that connected all the dots. That evening, I got an anonymous email. It was short and to the point. I was on the HOA board. I just resigned. Cynthia is running it into the ground. If you want to know how bad it really is, check the reserve fund. She's been cooking the books for years. Your garage issue is about to make her whole world collapse. It was from Nodding Nancy's husband, a quiet accountant who had clearly had enough. He attached a single file, a copy of the real, unedited HOA budget. I opened the file, and my jaw dropped. It was a financial apocalypse. The HOA was broke. Worse than broke, it was deeply in debt. The reserve fund, which was legally required to contain tens of thousands of dollars for major community repairs, held a grand total of $412. Cynthia had been using the general operating funds to pay for her kickback schemes and personal expenses for so long that she'd started draining the emergency reserves to cover the shortfall. Her entire lavish lifestyle, her power, her control, it was all funded by a massive, ongoing embezzlement scheme. It was a house of cards, and I had just threatened to take away the table it was sitting on. This was the second twist, the one that put everything in perspective. The pay or demolish notice for her garage wasn't just a nuisance. It was a mortal blow. She couldn't afford to pay me the exorbitant rent because she didn't have the money. She couldn't afford to demolish and rebuild the garage because she didn't have the money. She couldn't afford to fight me in court because no sane lawyer would take her case without a massive retainer up front. And she didn't have the money. I had thought I was trapping a wolf. It turned out I had trapped a wolf that was already starving. And now I had blocked its only path to food. Things began to unravel for her with terrifying speed. With her lawyer gone, the real estate agent she'd hired to fight my historic right-of-way claim also bailed. Word was getting around that the great and powerful Cynthia was legally and financially radioactive. A week after my notice was served, a new car appeared in her driveway. This one was from the bank. A man in a suit was taking pictures of her house. The rumors started flying. Walter was my primary source, of course. He reported that Cynthia had taken out a huge second mortgage on her house to pay for the garage and some other lifestyle upgrades. With her HOA income stream about to be exposed and cut off, and with new, massive legal bills on the horizon, she had missed a payment. The bank was getting nervous. Foreclosure wasn't just a possibility. It was becoming an inevitability. Emily watched all of this with a mixture of relief and pity. "I almost feel sorry for her," she said one night as we saw another official-looking car pull away from Cynthia's house. "Almost," I said. But then I remember what she did to our fence. What she did to Mrs. Peterson's prize-winning roses. What she did to the Ramirez family over the color of their kids' swing set. This isn't just about us, Emily. This is about everyone she's bullied for the last 5 years. I had her cornered from every possible angle. Legally, I owned the ground her garage was on. Financially, I had the proof she was an embezzler about to be exposed. Socially, her allies were abandoning her like rats from a sinking ship. She had no moves left, no legal options, no money, no friends. I had won. It was a total strategic victory. But my old training kicked in again, whispering a final, chilling warning in my ear. The most dangerous moment is when your enemy has nothing left to lose. I had pushed her to the very edge of the cliff. The only question now was, would she fall quietly, or would she try to drag me down with her? The final act didn't begin with a lawsuit or a legal document. It began with the sound of breaking glass in the middle of the night. I shot up in bed, my heart instantly racing. Emily sat up next to me, her hand gripping my arm. "What was that?" she whispered. I was already out of bed, pulling on a pair of jeans. "Stay here. Lock the door," I commanded, my voice low. I crept down the stairs, my old instincts taking over. My movements were silent, my senses on high alert. I grabbed the heaviest flashlight I owned from a kitchen drawer, a big metal mag light that could double as a club. I peered through the living room blinds. The street was dark and empty, but then I saw it. A dark figure hunched over near my new iron fence. They were holding a can of something, spray paint. It was Cynthia, dressed in all black like a budget ninja. She was frantically trying to deface the fence, the symbol of her defeat. I wasn't even angry. I was almost disappointed. After all the clever maneuvering, all the strategic gamesmanship, this was her final move. Petty vandalism. I didn't go outside. I didn't shout. I just walked over to my tablet on the coffee table and pulled up the live feed from the security cameras I had installed the day after she destroyed my first fence. I hit the record button. I watched in crystal clear, high-definition night vision as the HOA president, Cynthia, spray-painted crude words onto my property. When she was done, she threw the can into the bushes and scurried back to her house. It was pathetic, and it was the last piece of evidence I needed. The next morning, I didn't call the police about the vandalism. I had a bigger plan. The email from the former board member, the one with the real budget, had given me an idea. The bylaws stated that any resident could call for a special community meeting as long as they had signatures from 10% of the homeowners. I spent the morning walking the neighborhood. I didn't show them the video of the vandalism. I didn't even show them the file on her kickback schemes. I just showed them the two budgets. The fake one she'd been distributing showing a healthy HOA, and the real one showing they were broke. I explained how her financial mismanagement put every single homeowner at risk. If the HOA went bankrupt, they could all be hit with a massive special assessment to cover the debts. That got their attention. Fear is a powerful motivator. Getting the signatures was easy. The meeting was scheduled for that Saturday in the community clubhouse. I posted notices on the community message board. I sent out an email blast. I made sure everyone knew this wasn't going to be a quiet takedown. This was going to be a public reckoning. Saturday arrived. The clubhouse was packed. I had never seen so many of my neighbors in one place. There was a buzz in the air, a feeling of nervous energy. I saw Walter near the front, giving me a huge thumbs up. Emily was there, sitting in the front row. She squeezed my hand as I walked up to the podium I had set up. Cynthia was there, of course. She sat at the head table, flanked by the two remaining board members who hadn't resigned yet. She looked tired and haggard, but she still had that defiant, arrogant look in her eyes. She thought she could control this. She thought she could spin it. She had no idea what was coming. I started calmly. I welcomed everyone. I explained that I had called the meeting to discuss the financial health of our HOA. I put the two budgets up on a projector screen for everyone to see. The murmuring in the room grew louder. Cynthia stood up. "This is a lie," she shouted. "These are fabricated documents. This man has a personal vendetta against me because of a simple fence dispute." "Is it a vendetta, Cynthia?" I asked, my voice staying perfectly level. "Or is it a response?" And then I played my hand, one card at a time. "Let's talk about the landscaping contract with Greenleaf Services." I put the invoice on the screen. "You paid them $20,000 for new trees for the park. Odd, since the owner of Greenleaf is your brother-in-law, and only half the trees were ever planted." The crowd gasped. I moved to the next item. "Or how about the paving contract for the clubhouse parking lot? A $50,000 job given to a company that was created 2 days before the bid was accepted." One by one, I laid out the evidence from the file Mike the city worker had given me. The kickbacks, the embezzlement. Karen was screaming now, calling me a liar, a monster. The room was in an uproar. People were shouting at her, demanding answers. Then I played my ace. "And when the money from the operating budget ran out, you started stealing from our emergency reserve fund, the fund that is supposed to be there to protect all of us." I put the real bank statement on the screen, showing the pathetic balance. That's when the board members next to her stood up and walked away, leaving her all alone at the table. Her allies were gone. "You have no proof," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "It's my word against a disgruntled homeowner. "Is it Cynthia?" I said quietly, and then I played the video. The projector screen switched from bank statements to the night vision footage from my security camera. The entire room watched in stunned silence as their HOA president, dressed like a cat burglar, vandalized my fence. The humiliation in the room was absolute. She was exposed, a thief, a liar, and a petty vandal. She just stood there, her mouth open, her face ashen. She had nothing left. No lies, no allies, no escape. And as if on cue, 2 uniformed police officers whom I had called and asked to wait outside walked into the clubhouse. They walked right up to the podium. "Ma'am," one of them said, his voice calm but firm, "I think you need to come with us. We have a lot of questions for you." The showdown was over. It wasn't a loud, violent explosion. It was a quiet, systematic dismantling of a tyrant, piece by piece, in front of everyone she had ever tried to control. She didn't even look at me as they led her away. She just stared straight ahead, a broken queen being led out of her fallen kingdom. 3 months later, peace settled over Lakeview Hills like a warm blanket. The angry buzz of Cynthia's reign was gone, replaced by the simple sounds of a neighborhood at ease. Kids laughing, lawnmowers humming on a Saturday morning, the gentle clinking of wind chimes. The change was remarkable. It turned out when you remove a source of constant poison, things start to get healthy again very quickly. A new HOA board was elected. The president was a kind, reasonable woman named Susan, whose primary goal was to make sure the holiday decorations went up on time and that nobody's trash cans were attracting bears. It was boring and functional and absolutely perfect. My neighbor Walter, to everyone's delight and slight apprehension, was put in charge of the beautification committee. His first act was to approve a new, much wider variety of welcome mat colors. His second was to declare every garden gnome in the neighborhood a protected species. Cynthia's house went into foreclosure. The bank sold it to a young family who seemed thrilled to be there. They painted the front door a cheerful blue that would have sent Cynthia into a spiral of violation notices. As for Cynthia herself, she was tangled in a web of legal troubles, facing felony charges for embezzlement and a slew of misdemeanors for everything else. She had faded from our lives, becoming nothing more than a cautionary tale whispered at neighborhood barbecues. My lawyer handled the final details. The HOA's insurance, after a lot of pressure, paid for the damages to my original fence and covered all my legal fees. The evidence was so overwhelming, they didn't dare fight it. The case was closed. The war was over, and I had to decide what to do with the spoils. I owned 2 small, weirdly shaped pieces of land. One held the memory of a destroyed fence. The other held a piece of a disgraced woman's garage. The garage issue was solved quietly. The new owners of Cynthia's house were appalled when they learned about the property line. They were good people. We came to a simple agreement where I sold them the sliver of land under their garage for a fair price, and we all moved on. But the first piece of land, the strip she had called her shortcut, was different. That one felt symbolic. One sunny afternoon, Emily and I stood on that patch of grass right in front of the formidable iron fence. "What are you going to do with it?" she asked. I could have just kept it, a private buffer zone to protect our peace. But that felt like holding on to the anger. It felt like winning the war, but never leaving the battlefield. I looked at Emily, at the peace in her eyes that I had fought so hard to restore. "I have an idea," I said. I took down the iron fence. I sold it for scrap. In its place, I brought in good soil and lumber. With help from Walter and a few other neighbors, we built a small community garden. We put in flower beds and a couple of benches. We planted tomatoes and herbs and bright, cheerful marigolds. I put up a small, simple wooden sign at the entrance. It didn't say private property. It didn't say no trespassing. It just said community garden.